Good afternoon and happy feast to all of you for today's feast, for the Independence Feast, and also for the feast of tomorrow, the anniversary of the foundation of the work. In today's class, we are going to speak about the personality disorders. That is, when you find some people who has a special personality, we can say, how can we say that he has only some rare traits of his personality, or that he has something more severe as a personality disorder? Perhaps we can begin speaking about what the personality is. There was a work lesson about that. And we define personality as the stable pattern of relationship with oneself, with my inner world, with my feelings, with my affections, with my thoughts, the relationship with the others, and the relationship with the world, with the things that happen to me and usually affect me also from an affective point of view. We also spoke about the maturity signs, and today we are not going to speak about the normal personality, which is more or less mature, but about an illness, an ill personality. So we are not speaking about a strange personality only, but about ill, about sick personalities. It is, as you know, one of the three kinds of mental illness. We have the psychosis, the neurosis, and finally, the personality disorders. What can we say about the personality disorders? We can say mainly that it is a pathology. So, if it is a pathology, we are speaking about somebody who should go to a doctor or to a psychiatrist. It has an affectation at various levels. It can affect from the point of view or of the mood, of the behavior, of the way of thinking. They have a lot of, they are called cognitive disturbances or things of ways of thinking that are not healthy. They have usually, if you remember the structure of the big five about which we spoke, they have few traits, but they are very marked. They have few defense, but they are very marked. And they are rigid and they are persistent. I mean that even if the way of relating, the way of reacting in a concrete situation has failed, they usually repeat the same conduct because they don't have defenses, traits, instruments. We can say that can overwhelm the situation. It is said that Einstein used to say that it is idiot to try and give the same response to a problem and expect that the problem will be solved if it has not been solved in the past with the same response. But they persist, they are very rigid. They usually have affective disturbances. They have sadness, insecurity, fear, anxiety, feelings of inferiority. They handle frustration very poorly. They have a lack of control of their passions, of their emotions. They're very impulsive. So they have a lot of situations that make them suffer. They have, and there is a specific, very specific trait, they are very ambivalent. They can show love and hatred towards the same person. They can idealize and disregard them, and it takes them to have intense but very unstable relationships. And so they have a great maladaptation. They are not happy in practically in anybody, or perhaps at times they can be very happy and very adapted in a very concrete situation. But in other places, they are not. They can have like safe ports where they feel good because they have created their good relationships that make them feel good and secure. But in other circumstances, they are very bad. They have, and this is very characteristic, difficulty in establishing healthy and stable relationships. They can create healthy situations, but they are unstable, or they can create stable relationships, but they become unstable. I mean, they are so exigent with other people, they are so manipulative, is the one of the other key words they use. What does mean manipulation? It means that they try to invade others' personal space without respecting them. They are trying to feel them as they don't, as the other people don't want to feel guilty, to feel sad, to feel protective. So they try to induce the other people to feel or to act as they don't want to. It is like a kind of emotional blackmail. So they suffer and they make other people suffer. These personality disturbances begin usually in childhood, and you usually can see them in adolescence. They are very self-centered. They have that infantile characteristic of thinking mainly on themselves, on their feelings or their needs, and they cannot have that openness to the other, that extension of the sense of self that we speak about when we spoke about the maturity and the signs that Alport gave as a proof that a person is mature or not. How can we help these people? More or less, this slide have been seen in the video, but I think it is important to give some small tip so as to we can understand good the other part of the class. How can we help those people? Mainly pointing out their inappropriate behavior. It seems very simple, but in the practice it is not so simple because they tend not to recognize that they have a problem, or at least they don't recognize what their problem is. That their problem is that very self-centered, they won't recognize it usually, that they are very insecure, that they manipulate the others. They will say that the problem is that the other people don't comply with their necessity, that the problem is from the other people, not from them. Healthy people has very difficult to understand them. It is very difficult, sure, and it also means that it will be very difficult for a normal people, for a healthy people, to treat a person with a personality disorder. So it is important to know our own limits, because if those people tend to manipulate the others, they will also try to manipulate the formator. And if you are not on guard, you can suffer. You can damage the other people, and that people can damage you. you can enter into those toxic relationships. And obviously, it would be a great problem for both of you. So it is important to know these characteristics, at least basically, so as to detect and to act. So point out the inappropriate behavior. Then it helps also to distinguish which is psychology and which is interior life, because there is a great overlap in general in psychology, but mainly in these personality disorders, because what is self-centeredness, and from a psychological point of view, or what is the thinking only on oneself because one is very egoistic. How can we distinguish? Obviously, it is not so easy as doing a line saying this is psychology, that is lack of virtues. But we can say that because of the biographical issues that people had, that because of the responses that they have freely given, because of their a lot of reasons, they can have a great difficulty to live that to a normal life. We can say basically a very timid person. Is it a lack of give or thinking on the others, or it is a problem of his personality? The response is very important, because if the problem was only lack of interior life, we could say you have to pray more, you have to grow in virtues, you have to do an effort, and so on. But if the problem is mainly psychological, then the solution would be obviously virtues will help, but not only. And if we insist only on the aesthetical point of view, we can exhaust that people, we can exhaust ourselves, and we can continually shock on that problem without solving, and then we can also damage the people, because they can say that they haven't enough interior life, that they don't love God enough, and so on. And it is not the problem, because perhaps they can have a very healthy interior life in their illness. We can say a person that don't have a leg probably will be late in the prayer in the morning very often. But it is for lack of inner life? Obviously not. It is for a physical problem. So these people will lack for a lot of things in the family life, in the interior life, and so on, but because of the psychological condition. If we know the difference, if we know that this illnesses exist, we can do an early diagnosis. We can help to do an early diagnosis. We can the alarm can light, and we can say, I think these people should go to have a screening, a medical screening, because it is very difficult for him to have a normal life, to have normal relationships, to be serene, to be calm, to be he feels anxiety, up or downs on his mood, and so on. So perhaps it is not a problem of just immaturity. Perhaps it is not only a problem of selfishness. Perhaps it can be a psychological problem. So as he has a psychological problem, he should go to the doctor. How can we do these persons to go to the doctor? Usually not just send him, you have a personality disorder, because he will say, I don't have any personality disorder, so go you to the doctor because I needn't. We can rely on subjective symptoms. You have anxiety, you sleep bad in the night, it is difficult for you to relate, to interact with other people, so you should go to someone who shows you And I think an example that can help those people to go to the doctor is a comparison with physical illness. I mean, when you wake up one morning and you have a neck ache, usually, what do? You do nothing. You do some exercise that you download from YouTube, or some people recommend you to take a painkiller or so on. Okay, and can be okay. But what happens if that pain does not disappear in 1 week, or even it increases? Surely you will go to a physiotherapist, because he's the professional who is an expert in curing those problems. So the expert in helping people in improving their personality, their relationships, and so on, is the physiotherapist, is the psychologist, because these illnesses usually, obviously, do not improve by medication. Medication can improve the secondary symptoms, anxiety, depression, insomnia, and so on. But the traits need a psychotherapy. They have to sanctify their illnesses. If it's possible, not sanctifying too much the people who live with them. So with all the problems, with all their compliances, they have to not have as if they had a broken leg, as if they were diabetic, as if they had any other illness. They have to sanctify on that illness till they try also to improve, even to get cured. Another thing that we can do from the formation task is encourage missing traits and defenses. If the person has difficulty with his secureness, if he's very dependent, if he's very self-centered, if he thinks very much on himself, we can say him, have you thought about how the other people are feeling? Have you thought about what you can do so as to the other people feels better? I mean, get out of their egocentrism. It is important to have this in mind for the vocational discernment. This a person with a personality disorder, a person with a very extreme personality, will have difficult to be happy in a specific vocation in the church, any vocation, mainly for a vocation that means living with other people, living a centered example, because they have very difficult to live. We can remember parital relationships, relationship with people like them, and relationships in a long term. And then remember that they are very weak, even if they seem to be strong. So if you press them too much, they can break. So now we can go and study the 10 personality disorders. I think you have watched a video in which we explain mainly two kinds of personality disorder: the obsessive perfectionist personality and the dependent personality. So I am going to speak now on the other personality disorders about which we have not spoken. So as you remember, there are 3 clusters. The first one is called the odd or the eccentric people. They are 3 kinds. The paranoid personality, if we should give a name to that people, we can say the word that synthesizes their personality is mistrust. Paranoid refers to the paranoia, but they don't have the delusions that paranoid people have. What they have is a kind of suspicion. without basis on reality, and they see crooked intentions in the other, in such a way that harmless comments are looked upon as attacks. They imagine that people want to harm them, to take advantage of them. They suspect disloyalty in friends, even adultery in their spouse, and they are generally very spiteful. So these people, if you give them a task, they say, you want me to do this task because you want a second intention, no? Because you want me not to triumph in my job, because you want that I suffer, because you want I fail, you want to harm me. No, I only give you this task because somebody has to do it, and I have to ask you to do it because you have been the first person I have found. There are no second intentions, but they tend to see it usually. The second personality disorder in this cluster is the schizoid personality disorder. The key word that we can say is low emotional reactivity. Schizoid remembers the word to schizophrenia, that is a psychotic disorder. The schizoid person does not have the more severe symptoms of schizophrenia, that are delirium, delusion, and hallucinations. But they share the flattening of affect and the social isolation that characterize schizophrenic people. So they tend not to relate with other people. They react very little from an affective point of view. We can say, so they are timid. No, they are not timid. A timid person would be the dependent that we have watched in the videos. The dependent that is so frightened of a refusal that do not seek the interaction with other people. Schizoid personality does not interact with other people because he thinks that there is no point in socializing. He's really better on his own. Finally, schizotypal personality is the closest to a psychotic condition because apart from having perhaps some of the characteristics of the paranoid and of the schizoid, they have also, we can say, some eccentric interests and behaviors. So they can have superstitions, esotericism, language a little bit share. If we are in a religious sphere, they can have very interest in extraordinary apparitions, in diabolical possessions, in stigmata, revelations, and so on. So obviously, accompanying these people is very complex because they do not realize how strange their behavior is, and they don't feel the need of socialize. So the goals for them are very limited. We can say that the baseline for helping them would be to face reality with regards to events and with regards to people. So they have to learn that what other people want is only what they say. Cancel second intentions. Obviously, the charity helps a lot to these people, but think that if they are thinking badly of other people, it is not a lack of charity. It is not a prejudice. It is not a, but it is only their own condition. They are like that. So it would be not good for them to have compromises in a vocation because it would be very difficult for them to live the mission of that vocation, of any vocation. How could they do apostolate if they have important relationships, important difficulties to relate, to interact with other people? There is even a greater difficulty with schizotypal people, because at a first view, it can seem that they have a great religiosity because of the spiritual interest, but those interests are so strange, so bizarre, that something, mainly we who live an ordinary life, say this seems not to have a vocation for a normal, ordinary life. But even we can say that the great mystics that had extraordinary graces, as St. Francis of Assisi, St. Teresa of Avila, St. John of the Cross, St. Padre Pio, they had, in fact, mystical experiences, but they took them with a great discretion. Their day-to-day manner was very normal. And above all, they always submitted to their superiors and allowed their spiritual director to guide them. We remember that St. Teresa of Avila used to say that God is also among pots and pans. So a person who is more interested on stigmata than on ordinary life, he probably will have a problem of personality. Now we can go to the second cluster, the people who can be called the extroverted or self-centered. If the cluster A can be put into relationship with the psychotic illnesses, here we can recognize a little more the neurotic illnesses. So what can we say about the antisocial personality? Their key word is exploitation. They exploit other people. They are disregarded for other people, for rules, and they usually use other people by manipulating them, by deceiving them, by making promises that they systematically broke, and they don't feel guilt or remorse. That is another characteristic. My boss at the hospital used to say that you can find this kind of people in two places: as in prison, because they are criminals, or as CEOs of great business, because they have grown very, very much by stepping on the people, by not having scruples on exploiting the others. Sometimes, even from their youth, they used to hurt people or to harm people or animals for no other reason than only enjoying. When they are confronted to their acts, they tend to rationalize. They are the main mechanism of defense, rationalizing. They rationalize their abusive behavior, and they project the responsibility onto others. And then, if they are contradicted, they tend to be irritable and aggressive. So they're absolutely unable to establish genuine, intimate relationship, and they have a great lack of empathy for other people, for their suffering, for their needs, and so, except when they are trying to gain control over them. Then they seem very servicial, very worried about them, but they are only trying to catch them. The borderline personality disorder is characterized by instability. It is probably the worst personality disorder. They are very unstable, both internally. They have intense and ever-changing emotions, affective ambivalence, feelings of emptiness, depressed mood, impulsiveness, and then in their relationship. The relationships are usually very intense and fragile. They grow quickly and then they fall and then they break. They have a very unstructured self-image. It is very frequent borderline disease in people who have been abused in their infancy or neglected. They have a great fear of being abandoned, and they find very difficult to trust other people. So they have a great dependence and a great mistrust. So it is very difficult for them to have fulfilled the needing of security. They are distraught because they don't find it neither in themselves, neither in the others. It is very common on them to have suicidal ideation and self-harming behaviors. It is very common on them to cut themselves to relieve their anxiety. Then we have the histrionic personality disorder. The key word that we can give them is the seductive behavior, which is a Freudian concept that means not only a sexual behavior, but excessive attention seeking. There is a tendency of being the center of attention, and when they are not, they feel uncomfortable. When they don't receive affection and attention and so on, they feel neglected. They are very dependent on the esteem of the others, and they can be like childish or theatrical when they want to cut the attentions of the others. And they have a great vulnerability in their symptoms. They are very fragile. And finally, we have the narcissistic personality disorder, which is characterized, we can say, as delusions of grandeur. They have an exaggerated sense of their own importance and abilities. So they think that they deserve a great lot of people that should be admiring them. They can feel arrogant, haughty, and overbearing. They tend to exploit and humiliate others, but contrary to antisocials, they do not do it for the joy of humiliating the others, but because if I humiliate the other, it seems that I am higher. And the important thing is not making other people suffer at the antisocial, but feeling myself above the others. They take it for granted that they are out everything, and they can treat only high status people, that they deserve to spend time with them, and that they are destined to succeed. They are very envious of other people's success. We can say that they have also some kind of dependence. We can see that narcissistic people do not need of anybody. He's so great, but that's his weakness. They need other people to feeling good. When they are alone, they feel sad because they don't have somebody to praise them. So what can we say about the formation with the people? They are very difficult to treat because they don't, like the people in cluster A, they don't realize that they have a problem in their personality. They have a problem of self-centeredness, different from selfishness. So it is not a problem of virtue, but a problem of personality. Those concepts that interact, that overlap, but it is good to know that they are different. So how can we help them specifically? I think that the key for them is to realize that the other people have also necessities, and those necessities must be respected. And the social must realize that the other people cannot be abused. The histrionic must realize that the other people do not have the obligation to pray, to show affection, to dedicate time, to be attentive to them. The narcissistic must recognize that the other people have also their values, their virtues. If they realize, but it is easy to tell them, but they cannot understand that because of their illness. That's the problem. Okay, so we can go to the next personality cluster. Another thing that seems to me very important. We have said that narcissistic people, antisocial people, tends to be, at a first glance, they can seem very valuable, very valuable people we can trust of them. They tend to be leaders, and then they can grow in their institutions, because we have said that they can be in prison or CEOs, but also in church institutions, they can grow a lot. So it is not rare that they grow also in an institution, in an ecclesiastical institution. But and even they can grow by stepping the other people. But when they are on the top, as they don't respect the others, there is a great problem, because they abuse the people, not only from the point of view of the sexual abuse, but from the point of view of the other two kinds of abuse that Pope Francis said that are on the base of sexual abuse, which are the abuse of power and the abuse of conscience. They don't have problems in entering in that sanctuary, that tabernacle of the person who is the conscience, and force the people to do what they do, what they want, to manipulate the people. And they also produce a lot of problems on the institution with the obedience, because they want the other people to praise them, to obey them blindly. And if they are not obeyed blindly, then they say that the other people, the people in that institution, are not living well their vocation. So they confound the loyalty with the institution with the loyalty with their person. So if we see a person who tends to be invasive to the others, tend to put his opinion over the opinions of the others, but what we know, because it is the Lord that has said us that he has not come to be served, but to serve the other. So we see somebody who tends to be served more than serving, so be attentive. And then we finish, because I'm going to say only 2 words on those 3 personality disorders, because you have watched a lot on them in the videos. The avoidant personality disorder is that who should like to have interactions with the others, but he's more fearful of being refused. So he would like, he's not like the schizoid that is well with himself. Avoidant people would like to have a relationship with the others, but he's so afraid of being abandoned that he prefers to be with himself. He has a bad image of himself. Then we have the dependent personality, who has fear on being alone, on taking his own decisions. So he seeks for another person who takes the decisions for him. And then we have the obsessive compulsive personality, not to confound with obsessive compulsive disorder, the OCD, which is a person who is so insecure that tends to have everything around him very ordered. So as to, he knows that when he steps in one thing, everything is ordered, everything is in his place. So I have the control. That's the key word, control. He has the control on everything around him. As you have watched the videos, I want to speak on these personality disorders, but I will be happy to listen your comments or your answers if there are. So I finish here my exposition, and we can go to the debate and to your answers and your questions if there are. Let us see. There are now some questions in the chat. Let us see. So there are some jokes at the beginning, and now some questions. Being in the medical profession, it is easier to make this diagnosis, referring them to psychiatrists. Being in the medical profession, it is easier to make this diagnosis, referring them to psychiatrists is bad omen on our society. The difficulty remains in helping them to seek help. More insight to help them, please. Okay, probably in your society, it has the stigma, the telling someone to go to the psychiatrist. I must say that also in my society, in my work in Spain, in the little city of Badajoz, we have also that stigma that people used to say, I don't want to go to a psychiatrist because I am not crazy, and only crazy people go to the psychiatrist. And well, we had to tell them, don't worry, that most of the people we are treating in the hospital, in our ambulatory, are people, normal people that are on the streets but have anxiety, depression, and so on. But I think the key explanation we can give them, and I think they can understand that, is that those people, psychiatrists or psychologists, are the experts on mood disorders, on personality problems, on interaction problems. So if you want to interact better with someone, you can go to a psychologist so as to learn how to cope with your problems, with your insecurity. Also because a psychology and a psychiatrist, and that's one of the differences with a general doctor. A general doctor can give the appropriate pills, antidepressants, anxiolytics, and so on. But those people need also to go deeper in their biography, so as to see what their problems were, how their education was, and how it has affected their personality. And this last thing, that going a little in the deeper, you don't need to be a psychoanalyst to go to the deeper of a person at a certain way. But it is important because it is not as simple as doing behavioral therapy. You have to behave like this or like that. And sometimes formators can be a little behavioral, saying only you have to go with the other people. A person with a dependent personality, with a avoidant personality, even with a schizoid personality. You have to go to other people. Okay, but have you asked that people why he prefers to be alone? And how he has learned that it is better for him to be alone. It is, if you think about this, it is important. Why it is better for him to be alone? Because it is obvious the gratifications of being with other people, of enjoying, of laughing with other people, but instead they prefer to be alone. Why? What happened in their lives? What happens in their way of thinking? The more you detect the strange, the altered ways of thinking that they have, the more you will be able to convince them to go to a specialist. So we have here another question. With a scarcity of trusted professional psychotherapists and psychologists, how can we help someone, even in the work, who clearly have some of the problems as you classified as A, B, or C? Well, I would say first that the scarcity of people who can help has in some way diminished because of the pandemic. Because with the pandemic, in which nobody could go out home, psychologists and psychiatrists had the necessity of working by internet and doing online consultations. So now it is easier for you, for anybody, to detect some psychotherapists that can do all the therapy online. Then about that question, that how to help them, I can offer. Let's see. I'm going to do again the screen share because, as you remember, I have echo. We have here a link with let's see, echo. The first slide. So here at bit.ly HATP 2021, you have the slides, and I will also charge a little article that I published a few years ago about not A, B, C personality disorder, but about C personality disorder, which speaks about that avoidant and obsessive personality. Perhaps you will have some ideas. Then you have also different biography about those personality disorders. Perhaps I can also offer you some biography. I will upload it in the Dropbox that in which that link of bit.ly takes. Okay, then we can see another question. Can these disorders overlap in the same person? No, a personality disorder usually is clean. You can. It is very difficult for you to be introverted and extroverted, to be cluster A, cluster B, and cluster C at the same time. It is a contradiction in terms. But you can have non-complete illnesses, or you can have mixed illnesses. And in fact, the DSM-5 speaks about those illnesses that do not have all the criteria for being in one of these illnesses that we have spoken about. So you cannot be at the same time borderline and avoidant, but you can have a intermediate illness. And then how do you actually distinguish between whether it is a matter of interior life or a personality issue, so as to know how the person can be helped in both areas? Okay, I will look at the whole person. If a person has a problem of virtues, selfishness, as an example, he will probably have a poor interior life, a life of piety, a life of mortification, a life. But these people tend to have the problem only in those traits that we have said. He can be, as example, very narcissistic, but in other areas of his personality, he seems to work well. Even he prays, and he do services to other people, or what he thinks that are services. The problem is that what for him is a service, for the other person can be an abuse. Instead, people who has problems in virtues, if it is only a person that he doesn't think on the others because he lacks interior life or virtues, you would see a lack of that interior life. You will see that he doesn't really pray. Anyway, it is also always difficult because, as example, a narcissistic will interact with other people in a obviously narcissistic style, but also with God. If he's very exigent with the people, he will be equally exigent with God. Sometimes when you are not sure, and mainly with young people, with people, for example, young vocations, people in the center of study, it is wiser to ask for a screening by a professional. And then you can be sure, because that is one of the characteristics that makes up that you need time. Personality disorders tends to worsen with time. Instead, problems of virtues, of inner life, and so on, tend to improve. But it is a problem because when you find a person, you don't know if he will improve or he will worsen. And perhaps you will say, okay, let's go ahead, because he probably will grow in virtues and then he will improve those problems. But then as he continues, we see that he doesn't. And perhaps we have delayed acting on that people for a few years, and we had the suspect from the Center of Studies that these people doesn't fit in the vocation. I think that proof that is very even easy for people who live with that person and have that sensibility is how are their peer relationships. How does he interact with the other people in the center and with the other people in his work, in his university, his friends, and so on. And also, as these problems tend to manifest from adolescence and childhood, how were his relationships in his young age? And then they ask, when these personality disorders are detected, when these personality disorders are detected before whistling, does it impede being in the work and if already in the work, to what extent can the people be in the work? That's a very wise question. The first one is easy. If a person has a difficult personality, it is better for him not to whistle. Not for the center, surely also for the center, also for the work, but it is better for them because life as a numerary, as an associate, has so many interactions that if that person tends not to do healthy interactions, it will be a great problem for him to leave vocation happily. And what can we do if that person is already in the work? Because we didn't realize, because we thought that with some time, interior life and aesthetical struggle and so on, he will improve. What can we do? Well, I think that it also depends on the age of the people, on the severity of the case. I would say that also we are like the others, we are the others. We can have sick people, ill people in our family, and we have to care them with the same affection that a family will take care of them. If a brother of us, 40 years old, loses his leg in a car accident, obviously all the people in his center will have to dedicate time, patience. They will have to do his bed every morning. They will have to help them to move. Perhaps they will have to take them to work and a lot of things like his mom, his dad, his wife would have done. So sick people tends to break so many things in the life of the center that help the people to take out of them a lot of virtues. So it helps other people to grow. Mental illness also need people in the center to dedicate time, effort, patience, and if they do, they are also growing in virtues. That's why our father used to say that the sick people are the teacher of the work. Because if they sanctify the illness, they help all the people to sanctify themselves, to be more generous, to break their impulses, because I see that a brother of mine has a need. And it is easy when he don't have a leg, but sometimes it is not easy when we have a mental illness. So sometimes life for him and for the other people in the center is so difficult that it is better for him to live, mainly if he doesn't feel well or if the ambient in the center is suffering. But other times, with affection, with patience, we can help all the people, the other people, to sanctify illness, and we also sanctify ourselves. Let's go a little quicker on the other questions we have. On average, what percentage of people can have psychological disorders serious enough to justify encouraging them to visit a psychologist from of the participants? More or less, the prevalence of all these illnesses is 1% from about all of them. I mean, one person on 100 has a borderline, another one from 100 have a obsessive compulsive disorder, and so on. So they are frequent because they are 10, so 10% in the population will have them, a little less, but it is not infrequent. Of all these cases in clusters A, B, and C, is there a case and nausea that is there a case at nausea, one that has crossed the Rubik curve, irremediable, chronic, not manageable, one that has entered the other side of the gate hell? I would say yes, that we have, well, these people tend to have very, very severe problems for interacting with the others. They have problems in family, in job, sometimes with crimes and so on. So it is not infrequent, but you find them in hospital mainly. For context, our father enjoined we accompany soul up to the gate of hell, but I don't think one can go beyond this gate. Well, it is more or less that what we have just said, that we can help other people sanctifying themselves, but some other times we have to tell them, why, look, I'm sorry, but I cannot do any more thing for you. And I need be healthy. Perhaps because of your problem, I'm becoming ill with anxiety, with depression, and so on. And I need to, I love you very much, but I need to put a distance from you and me, because otherwise we are going to break with two. Anyway, I think that what our father used to say about the gate of hell has more to see with behaviors that are sinful, but perhaps it can also be said about this. Okay, then they say, since he compared mental health with physical health, should one recommend mental health checkup even when one does not have symptoms? From one, okay. Some people do. Now in seminary, in diocesan seminaries, most of them, they do some tests, some psychological tests before entering the seminary and in some moments along the seminary formation. Some people in the world have also said, well, we have also a peculiar formation, celibacy needs a peculiar life, a special maturity level, and so on. And it would be helpful for people to have some kind of personality checkup, as we have the yearly medical checkup. So it could help. I think that the good thing of that is that it would help us to detect those people. We have said firstly that we don't know. They have difficulties with treating other people. They are very irritable. They have a certain difficulty for the control of their impulses. They are very timid, but will they in the future get out of that, or will they worsen? And then instead of saying one people with 18, 20 years old, I think it is not your way, you will have to tell them when they are 30 years old, and it will be more painful. So a test, a preventive test would be useful. Well, in some institutions in the church, they do. I think that as a routine with the work, do not. I would not press for doing it for everybody, but at least to have a doubt, I would recommend you to look for a psychiatrist or a psychologist that can do this test, this checking. Okay, so we aimed, Father
Francisco,
I'm interested in 100 souls out of 100 them. We exclude some people. Why play God? I don't say that we have to rule out people. Absolutely not. But rule out, what does it mean? Does it mean for the vocation? I say yes. We rule out people from vocation because they don't have the minimal dispositions that are needed for a vocation. And in that sense, we can say that they do not have vocation, or at least at this very moment, it seems that they do not have vocation. But it does not say that we have to say, go away and I don't want to have anything to see with you. Obviously, we have to help everybody to grow in sanctity. And in that sense, we don't rule out anybody, even if they have a severe mental illness. So they say very intelligent people seem more to exhibit these psychological issues. Could it sometimes be a question of not understanding them or not measuring up to their intellectual level? Well, it is a question that is said sometimes. Anthony Hopkins in the Silence of Lambs is a very clever antisocial person. So antisocial persons are always very intelligent? No. Some of them are, some of them are not. The key is that some intelligent people can be antisocial or can be narcissistic. So the fact of being very intelligent or of reaching to the top in a business, an institution, a center, and so on, does not rule out that perhaps they have a personality problem. And so if you suspect, don't say, no, if he had a personality problem, he would not have gone so far. Perhaps he has gone so far thanks to the personality disorder, because he didn't have, as an antisocial, he didn't have problems on abusing other people, and so he grew by making other people fail.